Have you ever noticed something strange? You share a success, a new job, a personal milestone, something you're proud of, and the reaction feels off. The smile is there, the words sound supportive, but something underneath feels different. Then, months later, when something goes wrong in your life, those same people suddenly seem more relaxed around you, more comfortable, more present. Why does that happen? Why can someone feel distant when you're rising, but strangely warm when you're struggling? The answer isn't always cruelty. Sometimes it's something much deeper in human psychology. And once you understand the mechanism behind it, you start seeing it everywhere. Success changes the emotional atmosphere of a relationship, not always visibly, but psychologically. When someone close to you sees you succeed, your brain might interpret it as connection, but their brain might interpret it differently. Their brain might quietly ask a question it never asked before. Where do I stand now? Humans constantly measure themselves relative to others, not consciously, but automatically. Psychologists call this social comparison. Your brain keeps a mental scoreboard of where you fit in your environment: income, status, talent, confidence, achievement. Most of the time, this comparison runs silently in the background, but when someone close to you starts moving upward, that comparison suddenly becomes louder. And this creates a subtle psychological tension, because if your success increases the perceived gap between you, their brain has two choices. It can grow with you, or it can protect its own self-esteem, and sometimes protecting self-esteem wins. This is where things get uncomfortable, but also important. When someone feels relief at your failure, it doesn't always mean they hate you. It often means your success activated something called a self-esteem threat. In psychology, self-esteem is partly built through relative positioning. Your brain wants to feel like you are doing at least as well as the people around you. When that balance shifts too quickly, it can create internal discomfort.
And the brain tries to reduce that discomfort, sometimes by motivation, sometimes by denial, and sometimes by quietly feeling better when the gap disappears. This reaction even has a name in psychology. It's called Schadenfreude, a German word describing the experience of feeling satisfaction when someone else's status drops. It sounds harsh, but research shows it's surprisingly common, especially when two people occupy similar social roles: coworkers, friends, classmates, siblings, because similarity increases comparison, and comparison increases emotional tension. But this still raises an interesting question. Why does the brain respond this way in the first place? Your brain is designed to survive inside social hierarchies. For most of human history, social position directly affected survival. Higher status meant more resources, more allies, more safety. Lower status meant vulnerability. Your brain still carries this ancient system, and it constantly tracks relative position within your social group. Now, imagine two people moving through life at a similar pace. Their brains classify each other as peers. But if one person suddenly accelerates, gets promoted, builds something successful, or becomes more confident, the brain of the other person detects a status shift. This activates a psychological process called self-evaluation maintenance theory. The brain asks two questions. How close is this person to me? How relevant is their success to my identity? If someone close to you succeeds in an area that also defines your self-worth, the brain feels threatened. For example, if you and a friend both value creativity, and suddenly they become extremely successful in art, your brain may interpret their success as evidence that you're falling behind, even if that was never the intention. So when that successful person later experiences failure, something subtle happens in the observer's brain. The comparison gap shrinks, the threat disappears, and the brain experiences relief. Not because they want you to suffer, but because the psychological pressure disappears.
Understanding this doesn't excuse the behavior, but it explains it. And more importantly, it helps you respond to it wisely. Once you understand this mechanism, you start seeing relationships differently. Here are 4 principles psychology suggests for navigating this dynamic. 1. Notice energy, not words. Most people will never openly admit feeling threatened by your success, but emotions often leak through behavioral signals. shorter responses, less curiosity, subtle distancing. Example, you tell someone about a promotion. They say, "That's great," but immediately change the subject. Your brain might dismiss this, but behavioral psychology shows emotional discomfort often appears through avoidance cues, not direct conflict. Recognizing this helps you understand the emotional landscape of a relationship without immediately assuming hostility. 2. Reduce comparison triggers. People compare themselves most strongly with those who feel similar to them. Same age, same job field, same goals. The more similar two people are, the stronger the comparison loop becomes. One way to reduce tension is by differentiating identities. Example, instead of framing your success in direct comparison terms, "I'm ahead now," you frame it as a different path. Your brain naturally relaxes when identities feel less competitive. This shifts the relationship from rivalry to parallel journeys. 3. Protect your momentum. If someone consistently feels threatened by your growth, they may unconsciously try to pull you back to the level where the relationship felt stable, not always maliciously, subtly, through discouragement, sarcasm, or minimizing your progress. Example, you start a new project. They respond with, "That probably won't work," or "People try that all the time." Behavioral psychology calls this status equilibrium pressure. Groups unconsciously push members toward familiar roles. Recognizing this helps you avoid shrinking yourself to maintain comfort for others. 4. Identify who celebrates without comparison. Not everyone reacts this way. Some people feel genuine joy when you succeed. Why?
Because their self-worth isn't tied to the same comparison domain, or because they operate with secure self-esteem, which is less dependent on external ranking. These people feel inspired by your growth rather than threatened by it. Psychologically, these relationships are incredibly valuable because they create something rare, a social environment where progress feels safe. Once you see the pattern, a quiet realization appears. Human relationships often operate inside invisible comparison loops, not because people are bad, but because the brain constantly monitors its position inside the group. Success changes those positions, failure reshapes them again, and every shift creates emotional reactions, some supportive, some uncomfortable. Understanding this doesn't mean becoming cynical, it means becoming aware. Because awareness lets you stop interpreting every reaction as betrayal and start seeing the deeper psychology behind it. There's a strange paradox about growth. The higher you move, the more clearly you see who feels comfortable beside you. Some people relax when you shrink, others expand when you rise, and over time, that difference becomes impossible to ignore. But the goal was never to manage everyone's comfort. The goal was to keep moving forward without losing your sense of who you are. Because the right people in your life won't feel smaller when you succeed. They'll simply stand next to you and grow too.